Hello, how are you? I know it's been a while. I've missed you. But I've been watching you from afar, and I want you to know I really applaud every step that you're taking in the right direction. Welcome to Tom Rhodes Smart Camp. The world gets meaner and nastier every day, and there's things that we can take refuge in, like stand-up comedy and art and literature. I know I've been diving into reading classic books to try to shut out the chatter of social media and world news propaganda. But one of my favorite refuges and things that I love, I'm not a big sports guy. I think most people know that. I'm not, I grew up in a household with two older brothers and my father, and they were very jock-minded people. I remember when the newspaper used to come, my brothers would fight for the sports section or the headline section, and I always got the entertainment section. And that was what I was interested in, and reading about what movies were coming out. And, the horoscope was always a joy. I kind of missed that from newspapers not being as prevalent as they once were in the world. And even though I would always scoff at it and think, yeah, that's a bunch of bullshit, it was cute to see what might happen to your horoscope sign, me being a Capricorn, the moody, hard-headed leaders of the world. Anywho, I love baseball. And today's episode is why I love baseball. So, number one, let's talk about the beauty of the sport itself. Okay, number one, it's all the things that are the strengths of the male species, of being able to run and catch and depth perception. But also, I love that it's the game of summer. It's not ruled by a clock. And then also, it's the only sport where there's not men rubbing up against each other in kind of a brutish, homoerotic kind of way. There's very little, unless there's a close slide at a base or home plate. Baseball is, you act as a team when you're in the field. There's 9 players. And then also you get your moment as an individual. I love there's so many expressions in baseball, like everyone gets their turn at bat, where it's you against the world by yourself when you're batting. But, just you run, you hit, you throw, you catch. There's not, like basketball and football and hockey and just men rubbing up against each other. And I would say soccer is like that also until someone scores. And then it's like, they take off their shirts and they're hugging and they're kissing and they're rubbing up all over each other. That's for sure. But also I think the thing that makes baseball so great is that any size human being can play it. Like in soccer, you got to be able to run for a very long time. And small humans can play that game also. But, for basketball, you need to be born tall. For football, you got to have some kind of, big, massive body, lots of muscles, and hockey, you got a skill on your skates and that's beautiful and everything. But, it is a toughness of slamming up against each other and stuff. Where baseball, even short, fat guys can play baseball. And, you often see that. You'll see like a very large human who's a great pitcher or a great catcher. And you didn't need to be tall. You didn't need to be muscular. That any size human being can play the game of baseball. So I guess that's one reason I love it. But also, my family was kind of a football family. My brothers loved football. My dad loved football. So it was kind of like an act of rebellion to be a baseball fan. But I always thought it was more of an intellectual sport. You got to be thinking all the time of, where you're going to throw the ball, if there's someone on base, how you're going to act when you're on base, how many outs there are, can you steal, all this stuff. So, and it's a lazy game. People think it's boring. I heard a comedian say that if baseball was any more boring, it would be farming. That was Roger Rittenhouse. God bless him. One of the best comedy writers ever. But I think the simple fact of why I love baseball comes down to this. It was something that my father and I would do. When I lived in Europe, and a lot of my European friends who love soccer/football, I talked to them like, why do you love soccer? Because when they were a little kid, their father took them out to a park or the backyard and they kicked the ball together. So for me and my dad, we'd grab the gloves and it was always, hey, you want to play catch? We'd grab our gloves. It was very important to have a glove. I'll never forget, my first glove. And, you always had to know where your glove was. It was an important piece of equipment for life. But it was really great because this was a moment that I got to have with my dad, where it was just he and I, and whenever we threw the ball, we could have a conversation. And just he and I by ourselves, we'd go in the yard, go into a park, and just toss the ball back and forth and shoot the breeze. And, I could talk about my brothers, talk about what was happening at school, ask my dad questions about life. And it was this really beautiful, private moment that I had with my dad. Oddly enough, my father loved stand-up comedy. And so he's the reason why I fell in love with stand-up comedy. And my father is the reason why I fell in love with baseball, because my dad also loved baseball. So here's my little baseball history with my family and me personally. I was born in Washington, D.C. My family were all Washingtonians. And my father grew up loving the Washington Senators, which was a horrible team. And his favorite player of all time was Mickey Vernon. And I read, there was something I heard not too long ago where the owner of the Boston Red Sox and the owner of the Washington Senators had gotten drunk together somewhere like, I don't know, mid-late 1940s. And they were going to trade Ted Williams to the Senators for Mickey Vernon to the Red Sox. And then it ended up never happening. But that would have been an atomic bomb in the world of baseball. So the last Washington Senators game was in 1971. And then they went off and became the Texas Rangers. And I think they're somehow connected to the Minnesota Twins, whatever happened to the organization when they dissolved. But I was born in 1967, so I was 4 years old when my father took me and my two older brothers to the last Washington Senators game. My father thought it was important that we be there for that. And I don't know if it's in my memory or if the story was just told to me so many times through the years by my father that the game was canceled somewhere halfway through because all of the Washington Senators fans at the last home game at Griffith Stadium, they all stormed the field and were tearing up the field and grabbing bases and grabbing souvenirs. And so I kind of remember this chaotic moment in my mind, but it may have just been the story retold to me through the years and the way I imagined it. But nonetheless, I, at 4 years old, was at the last Washington Senators game. So when the Senators left, my family became Baltimore Oriole fans because Baltimore is only like 28 miles from Washington, D.C., and we lived in Silver Spring, Maryland as a kid. And the Orioles they were exciting in the late 70s, early 80s. I mean, Eddie Murray was one of my favorite players. He had a big afro that it was cool the way it would stick out underneath his hat, and he was just a killer hitter. But the Baltimore Orioles had this pitcher. Oh my God! Why can't I? Oh my God! Jim Palmer. Oh my God! How could I ever forget Jim Palmer? Jim Palmer. He won 3 Cy Young Awards, I think maybe 4, and he was gorgeous. This guy was so beautiful, and he had like that really early 1980s feathered haircut. I remember when I was, we moved to Oviedo, Florida when I was 12. So I remember I used to get my hair cut like Jim Palmer. I would take a picture of this guy and have, it was the Country Hair Affair and Lisa Hostetler's mother. I guess this was when I was in junior high school. So I might have been hitting 13 when I'm tearing the page out of the magazine asking to get the Jim Palmer haircut, which was good because when I was 10 and 11, I think I had the Pete Rose bowl haircut where I looked like Moe from the Three Stooges. But Jim Palmer, in the 1980s, he did a advertisement for jockey underwear. So it was so ubiquitous. Every magazine and there were billboards. It was this massive advertising campaign where Jim Palmer, he's wearing, all he's got on is jockey underwear. And he had a really hairy chest and his feathered hair, and he's got like, I don't know, one leg up on a box. And anyway, so the man in his underwear, it was a very prevalent image in advertising in the 1980s. So, and I'm sure that's the picture that I took in to have my haircut like Jim Palmer. So one day it was announced that Jim Palmer is going to be at, I think it was the Altamont Mall, and he was doing a promotion. And my father took me to go see Jim Palmer, my hero, at the Altamont Mall. And I remember standing in line for like, I don't know, an hour with all these other people. And then finally, I get to the front to Jim Palmer's at the table. And I said, Jim, could you sign to my pal Tom, Jim Palmer? And the guy like laughed and he signed it. So what he signed was a poster. It was like whatever department store, Dillard's or whatever department store was there, Jim Palmer was doing a promotional tour for the jockey underwear campaign. So what he signed for me was this poster of him in his underwear. It was a light blue. I still have the poster. I found it when my father died and I was looking through his stuff. It's pretty awesome. My dad held on to some items like this from my life. But I remember taking this poster and I put it on my wall. I had these, baseball sports posters all over my walls as I was growing up. And anyway, so when I would go to sleep as a kid, I'm looking at this poster of Jim Palmer in his underwear. So definitely, I think you're definitely born gay. You're not. It's not something you learn because I should be gay and only dating baseball players because I slept underneath this photo of this really gorgeous man in his underwear. But it's funny when. Back in the Twitter days when I cared about, I guess this is like 10 years ago when I moved to Los Angeles and I found that poster in my stuff. My father died, November 2009. So I looked through his stuff and then found that poster. But then I found it again when I moved into this apartment. And I took a picture of it. And then I tweeted it to Jim Palmer telling him that story. And then like he tweeted back. That was like, that was one of the highlights of my Twitter experience. That and when Ari Shafir got my diamond status reinstated on Delta Airlines. But other than that, Twitter was a horrible experience, and I haven't been on there since X. It turned into X. But nonetheless. So my family moves to Oviedo, Florida, when I'm 12. And so my two choices in life, I thought, I either want to be a baseball player or I want to be a stand-up comedian. And Florida has spring training baseball. So it was really great. So then here's most all of the teams every spring. And Orlando had the Minnesota Twins. And I remember we would go see Minnesota Twins games a lot. And just forgotten names, their stars. They had Roy Smalley and Rob Wilfong. But there was a guy, I think he played right field. I have his baseball card here. And he's one of my favorite players of all time. And his name was Rick Sofield. Because the guy was nice to me. He was a good-looking guy, and I just chose him as the guy I'm gonna cheer for. And I'm looking at his baseball card, lifetime batting average, 257? Anyway, that's not too bad. Anyway, I loved Rick Sofield just because he was kind to me as a kid, and it was really fun. The Orlando Twins was the AA minor league baseball team for the Minnesota Twins. But also, you had the Red Sox were in Winter Haven. The Astros were in Cocoa Beach. And my father used to come and get me out of school to play hooky and go see baseball games with him in the daytime when there was spring training baseball happening. I remember a note would come to the office saying that I had a doctor's appointment or a dentist appointment. And then note comes to the teacher, Tom, you have to go to the office. You have a dentist appointment. And I'd be walking to the office and I'm thinking, I don't have a doctor's appointment. And I'd get to the principal's office and there's my dad standing there with a shit-eating grin on his face. And he would get me out of school and he would take me to games. And it was great. It was kind of like this, secret criminal activity I did with my dad. He would, we're playing hooky together. My dad was my friend. And so there's basically number one why I love baseball. It was this private thing that I did with my father. We would go play catch and have a conversation. And it was one of the few times I ever got to have my dad alone, he and I. He worked all the time. And then he comes home and he's got a big family. And then he's dealing with the wife. And, he wasn't, he caused my mom a lot of problems. So, they had to iron shit out constantly. And then my two older brothers were always fighting. And I think they were a headache for my dad. So this was like the private moment that I got to have with me and my pops. Just he and I tossing the ball around. And then he gets me out of school to go watch baseball games with him. And it was just so special. And, that is the core granite foundation of why I love baseball. But I remember there was really great story back from the, we're talking early 1980s, like 81, 82, 83. The Yamamori Giants from the Japanese League. And that's the Tokyo Giants, the team of Tokyo, but they're called Yamamori. They were playing the Houston Astros in an exhibition game. And my father got me out of school and took me. We drove to Cocoa Beach just to see the manager of the Yamamori Giants was Sadahara Oh. And he was the Babe Ruth of the Japanese Baseball League. He had the most home runs in a season, most home runs in career. And so my father thought it was important that we go just to go look at this great man and be in his presence, his aura. So that was really cool. And then the most memorable thing, I remember him managing, and then when he would come out and the audience would clap every time he came out of the dugout and cheer, just because he was a person of greatness. But the thing I remember the most, the Houston Astros played in this really small complex. It was almost like a high school field or a community college type of baseball field. So they had right beyond center field, right past the wall, they had it was a big flagpole with the American flag on it. And so my father and I, we get there. We didn't have tickets. And there was like the local, and my father was a member of the VFW, the Veterans of Foreign Wars. So I think it was like the local VFW and then the local Cocoa Beach police were doing the security in the front. But this is a long time ago in America. So they played the national anthem, and all of these, swamp redneck cops and VFW people, they turned towards center field, and they all put their hats over their heart, or their hand over their heart. And my father nudges me, and he grabs me just gently with his thumb and middle finger and index finger. He lovingly pulls my shirt, and we stepped in the entrance, and then we did a little sidestep around these men, and then when we got all the way to their left, my dad puts his hand on his heart, and I put my hand on my heart, like we were there in the line of cops and VFW people the whole time, and we didn't pay to get in because these people's patriotism was so strong, it made them take their eye off of the ball, off of the entrance, off of the cash box. Anyway, my dad was always doing fun, cool, criminal shit like that. And so that was an important story in my youth. So now I want to turn your thoughts to where I grew up in Oviedo, Florida at the time. When I was growing up there, we moved to end of 1979, 1980. I remember we moved down there right before Christmas and started the new year, new decade in Oviedo, Florida, 1980. And Oviedo, Florida has kind of grown up. It has grown up, where it's 18 miles east of Orlando, and it was really a small country town. You had to take Redbug Road way out. What was that? Loma? Am I forgetting? Whatever state road that is, that went into Oviedo. And when I grew up there, it was a small citrus farming village. There was orange groves everywhere. Like 2 blocks from the house I grew up in was just orange groves. And it was great running around barefoot and grabbing oranges off the tree and eating them. And it was an idyllic place to grow up, and most everybody had swimming pools. I've said it many times. The first women I ever kissed was after swimming in pools. So to this day, the smell of chlorine on a woman drives me crazy. But we had baseball pretty much all year round. And so we had one traffic light and a tractor crossing. The Dudas, whatever that sod company. Then I grew up with the Valerie and Donna Duda. They were like, I guess, the most prominent family in the little village. And they sold the property that they owned and lived on, and that's where the Oviedo Mall is now. But anyway, it was a small town. Oh, but Orlando through the years grew and grew, and then they knocked down all the orange groves and put housing developments and a circular highway around Orlando. So now my charming little citrus village is, there's a couple of highway exits, and it's got all the stuff that you see everywhere, Target and Burger King and all that. But anywho, I think probably the biggest social activity in Oviedo, Florida, when I was growing up there, was centered around the Oviedo Little League complex. And it was really a big deal. I remember opening day. This is one of my favorite things about growing up in Oviedo. Opening day of the Little League baseball season, they would have the Little League parade. So every baseball coach, I mean, this was a really, I mean, you know, like redneck is the wrong word. I mean, just country people. And so all the coaches drove pickup trucks. So the Oviedo Little League parade, basically all the little kids from each team would all get into the back of the pickup truck. And there'd be like a poster board with the name of the team on the side of the truck, on the passenger doors, like Orioles, or I played for the Athletics, or Yankees. And so this, like, I don't know, 10, 12 vehicle parade would slowly drive through the town from downtown. There was a big parking lot. There was, it's now where the True Value hardware store is, but there was Meat World was the grocery store. And that was the center of activity in Oviedo back then. I remember they would do 4th of July fireworks there. They would have fish fries where they would, to raise money for, you know, sports teams, uniforms, and that kind of thing. And my first job ever, when I was 16, I got a job bagging groceries at Meat World. So all the pickup trucks and families, you know, we'd all meet at the Meat World parking lot. The kids get into the back of the pickup truck, and then it would drive like the trucks, pickup trucks in a little slow procession, 20 miles an hour, would drive to the Oviedo Little League. And that was the Oviedo Little League parade. And it was awesome. I felt important. And I played for the Athletics. And there was a couple of, in my time there, it was I don't know, what was it, 3 years? But like the first season, or maybe 2 seasons, was the coach was Mr. Childers, or Coach Childers. And he had 2 sons that played on the team. And one was an exceptional athlete. This guy was amazing. And he was the catcher. And he was a killer hitter. And then the other brother that played for the team was small, and he wasn't very good. And I remember he would play right field. And he would sit out. He would stand with his legs crossed and a hand on his hip. And he had his glove right in front of his face. And one time a ball was hit out to right field, and it went rolling not far from this kid. And it was hilarious because out of his glove, he pulled out a big Coke with a straw. He had a soda, big soda with a straw, and he put it down, and then he ran after the ball. So the kid had snuck out there with this big soda hidden in his glove. And he just thought, I'm going to just pass the time out here sipping on my Coke. So I remember his dad was really pissed off at him over that. And we laughed and laughed. But anyway, Coach Childers had this other son who was older, and really interesting guy. He was tattooed, and he wore cutoff shorts. And his pickup truck, behind it, he pulled one of those tar things where when they retar roofs. I remember I always had to go to summer school at Oviedo High School, and the smell of burning tar always reminds me of summer school, because that's when they would retar the roof. So this guy was like a roofer, and he would pull this, like, this tar splattered little cart behind his pickup truck. And so this guy's coming straight from work. He would come and help his dad coach the team. So the guy had tattoos, and then his face had kind of pockmarks on it. I always thought maybe from splatter to tar or whatever, but he was like a coarse looking dude, like a really, a hardworking country fucking guy who had experienced a lot of tough shit in his life. I mean, he seemed older, but I mean, the guy was probably in his early 20s. And I remember he had a little mustache. But anyway, this guy was amazing. He was a hell of a ball player also. And this Childers family loved baseball. So the whole family got involved on, the dad and the oldest son were the coaches. And then the middle son and the youngest son also played on the team. So I forget the guy's name, but man, what a hero this guy was to me. This guy, taught you how to get in front of a grounder. Even if you get down on your knees, you want to stop the ball, and how to spin and throw. And I had a hell of an arm. I played outfield. And this guy, I think I was always with my dad and my Uncle Bob. We were always going out to the Oviedo Little League to take batting practice and just, hone my skills as a baseball player, because I was, kind of entertaining the thought of one day being a professional. But this country guy who was a tar roofer, he was amazing. And I'll never forget the guy. It's too bad I forgot his name, but man, he could play baseball. And he really taught you how to hit. I think he may have been the first person where, you want to spin your hips and really throw your wrists and your fists holding the bat into the swing to jack the shit out of it. And then I think I'm getting older, and then I think I was in 9th grade at Oviedo High School. I was still playing for the athletics, and then we had Coach Reichley. And he had 2 sons that played for the team also. And I also played with his 2 sons at Oviedo High School. I made the baseball team. And it was really, really, really special memory for me. I'm sorry, I'm hesitating because I'm thinking, my senior year, and my high school baseball coach, Coach Maybe, and thank God for when Facebook was invented. I've been able to stay in touch with him. Many, many episodes, maybe 10 years ago, I had him as a guest on my podcast. But I'm still in touch with the guy, and I still love him. Very important person in my life, Coach Maybe, Howard Maybe. And he was funny. He was hilarious. And he said one of the greatest things I've ever heard in my life. He said, you should never be trying to hit a home run. A home run should be the accident of a line drive. You should always just trying to be getting solid wood on the ball. And that a home run should be the accident of getting solid wood on the ball, smacking the shit out of it. So I've kind of applied that to my whole life. That you should just focus on doing the best you can on this, on this skill, and all the great things will happen if you just focus on getting solid wood on the ball. That every once in a while, you will smack the shit out of the ball and it will go over the plate. But I remember Coach Maybe, he had me, I remember when I made the varsity baseball team, and this was so important to me. I started doing stand-up comedy February 4th, 1984. I was still a junior in high school. So when I went out for the varsity team, when I went out for the team my senior year, I was already doing stand-up comedy in Orlando and then doing one-nighters around Florida and stuff. So I made the team, and when Coach Maybe was reading out all the people who made the team, he said, you're not the best player on the team, but you've got heart, you hustle, and you're funny. And you'll be an asset to us on the bus for away games. So anyway, I thought it was interesting that he pointed out the fact that he thought I was funny was one of the reasons why he wanted to have me on the team. But as you know, if you've heard my story about this, I failed off the baseball team. I took French in high school. You could have an elected. It was one class you could choose for yourself. Your elective. So a lot of people did like woodwork or, power mechanics or PE just to get an easy pass. And I wanted to learn French. I thought it was sexy. And the teacher, I'll keep her name to myself. She wasn't even the French teacher. She was the Spanish teacher. This was the only French class she had. And she made me sit on day one, in the desk in front of her desk. She said, I want you to sit here and so I can keep an eye on you because I heard you were trouble. So she had condemned me before I had ever done anything wrong. And then I was older. There was a lot of cute 9th and 10th graders, girls in there. And anyway, I thought the woman kind of made me look like a jackass by saying I was trouble and she needed to keep her eye on me. But nonetheless, I worked my ass off in that class and she gave me, it was a D. I didn't fail, but you had to have a C average to play sports. And I remember going to talk to her and asking her if she could change this D into a C. And I really worked my ass off in that class and she wouldn't do it. So anyway, I'm still pissed off about that. I got to learn to let shit go. You know what I'm saying? Well, it was probably for the best that I focused on my stand-up comedy career. So I graduated high school when I was 18. And then when I was 19 years old, I went on the road. And I was doing gigs anywhere I could get them and driving anywhere in the United States to MC, to be the host for like $150. And I would sleep in my car and I had read Jack Kerouac's On the Road. So I was really just up for the adventure. And I knew I didn't want to go to university because they weren't teaching stand-up comedy there. So when I was 19, I think it was in Jacksonville at the Punchline, I worked with John Fox, this kind of famous road warrior comedian. He was a big coke-sniffing, skirt-chasing Viking of the American comedy club circuit back in the day. He had done like an HBO young comedian special. And he looked like kind of a blonde surfer. But he was from Chicago. But then through the years, he like his partying and it didn't turn out good for him at the end. And he looked like kind of a bloated alcoholic. But nonetheless, the guy still had a little bit of fame when I met him. And he got me in to Zany's in Chicago on Wells Street. And then I would do their other club in Mount Pleasant. So he got me the MC work with him when he was booked there. And God, I'll never forget driving to Chicago for the first time, like driving into that city. Wow, what a sight. And even on the highway, just the cars buzzing in there. It just feels like an excitement. And then, and there was no cell phones back then, no smartphones. So, you'd get to a city and you'd have to, get off the highway exit and find a payphone and you'd call the club and then they'd give you directions and, keep going on the highway until you get to exit whatever, exit there, take a right, go down 3 lights, take a left, and then blah-de-de-blah. It's amazing how I found all of these comedy clubs just using a map and then calling from a payphone. But John Fox took me to Wrigley Field. He was a huge Cubs fan. And Wrigley Field is absolute paradise on earth. And just the way it's built into the neighborhood. And John Fox was he was a Chicago celebrity. So he took me up into halfway through the game, or not halfway through, more than that. He took me up into the sportscaster's booth to meet Harry Carey and Steve Stone. Steve Stone is now the primary Cubs, sportscaster, but Harry Carey was this legend. And so we go up there and we meet him. And then Harry Carey would sing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game," but in the in the middle of the seventh inning, hanging out the window. And to this day, that's my favorite thing about going to there's a lot of things I like about going to see Major League Baseball. Number one, it's one of the few places where you can throw trash on the floor. And then also you can yell at the millionaires on the field. That's always exciting. Call a rich guy a bum for not hustling. But when in the middle of the seventh inning, when you sing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game," I love that. I love that moment. That's my favorite moment. Take me out to the ball game. Take me out to the crowd. Buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jacks. I don't care if I ever get back, 'cause it's root for the home team. If they don't win, it's a shame, 'cause it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game. Now, the story I heard or read somewhere, the guy who wrote that song was living in Brooklyn, and he was an immigrant to the United States. I think he was Greek or Italian, who knows? Maybe he was Hungarian. But the guy had never been to a baseball game when he wrote that song. He just knew of this excitement. And he knew, that feeling in Brooklyn when there was a baseball game on and people were riding, And then John Fox and I met up with Steve Stone sometime later, a couple days later, and we went out drinking with the guy. And it was amazing. Steve Stone pitched for the Baltimore Orioles, and he won the Cy Young Award one year. And I remember in art class, I would draw pictures of Steve Stone because I was an Orioles fan and I was in love with the guy. And then here it is, 3 years later, I'm in Chicago out drinking with the guy. I'm like, oh my God, stand-up comedy is the best thing in the world. It gives you access to your heroes. So to this day, Wrigley Field is still one of the most special places in the world to me. I think that's just paradise on earth to go see a game at Wrigley Field. So when I was 22, I moved to San Francisco and I became a Giants fan. So, I love the Cubs, still got a place in my heart for the Orioles, but just that time was so transformative in my life. The comedians that were around in that scene back then, and then the comedy community in San Francisco, they would all meet to go play softball. I always loved cities where the comedians once a week would all meet up to play softball. That was always fun. I remember the DC Improv did that years ago. And in San Francisco, they had that. In Chicago, comedians would do that. And anyway, so, I'll never forget when San Francisco got Barry Bonds and everybody loves the home run hitter. A home run is the most exciting thing that can happen in baseball. You hit the ball out of the park. I love all the expressions associated with baseball. He knocked it out of the park. There's no arguing with a home run. Boom. It's out of the park. It's a run. So, excuse me, Barry Bonds, killer hitter. I loved living in San Francisco, and I lived on Alamo Square Park on Fulton Street, Fulton and Pierce. And my father, I forget what birthday it was. My father was living in Los Angeles at this time. And I think he was turning 55 or 60. I don't even remember. But my father was going to come up and spend his birthday with me in San Francisco. So my Uncle Bob and my brother John, they wanted to come out and surprise my dad for his birthday. So they didn't have the same relationship with my father that I did. And they still had a lot of resentments towards my dad for being unfaithful to my mom and doing just, I don't know, shit that they had grievances over. So the night before my dad's birthday, he's gonna drive up from Los Angeles on his birthday. And so my brother John and my uncle Bob are talking. They're in my apartment at 1108 Fulton Street. And they're talking about, you know what, let's confront him about all the bad shit that he did and that they were still upset with him over. And I said, don't you dare do that. It's the man's birthday. Wait until the day after his birthday if you want to confront him about shit that you're pissed off about. But, you know, it's funny. I think birthdays are sacred. And, you know, just let the man enjoy one day where we can celebrate him without you jumping in his shit. And they're like, no, we're going to do this. So, all right. So, and I said, don't you dare do this in my home. I don't want you to do this. But, you know, they're both kind of assholes. And I knew that they were planning on doing this, that they're going to, you know, jump on my dad and, whatever, shit on him on his birthday about, you know, whatever the fuck he had done in the past. So, you know, when it comes time, they're like, okay, so, you know, how are we going to surprise your dad? So they said when, you know, like an hour before your dad arrives, what you take us, you know, he said, show us a bar where we can meet. We'll go have some drinks in this bar and we'll be waiting. And then when your dad comes, you say, hey dad, let's go get a drink somewhere. And then you take him to the bar and then we'll jump out and go surprise. So I knew they were going to do this thing that I told them I didn't want them to do. So what I did, so I lived on Alamo Square Park, Fulton Street. So I get them I had a beautiful 1978 white Cadillac sedan. So we jump in my Cadillac and we drove up to Divisadero Street and take a left. And we drove over to the Castro. And so after at the corner of Divisadero and Market Street, you know, so Castro is the famous gay neighborhood. And my brother John and my uncle Bob were two of the most homophobic people I've ever known in my life. Just always, everything is, you know, the F word and gay and all this shit. So, they didn't know that was the gay neighborhood. So I drive them down to Visadero and I point out Twin Peaks Bar. I said, we'll meet there at that bar. It was probably like a mile and a half from where I was, from my apartment. So Twin Peaks, you know, I think it might have changed a little bit, but in the early 1990s, Twin Peaks Bar at the corner of Divisadero and Market Street was a really tough gay guy bar. It was what you would call a leather bar. So all these really muscular, tough gay guys in like assless chaps and motorcycle jackets, just like, you know, really, what was that George C. Scott movie? Anyway, it was really badass, tough, brutal, assless chap gay men hanging out at the Twin Peaks Bar. So it's like, whatever, 3:00. My dad gets there at like, you know, I don't know, 1:00, 2:00. And then, you know, Natalie, the wonderful French woman that I lived with, you know, she loved my dad. She used to call him Big Daddy. Oh, Big Daddy, happy birthday, Big Daddy. So, you know, we wish my dad happy birthday and we're hanging out with him for like an hour. And then at 3:00, when I'm supposed to meet my brother and my uncle to surprise my dad, he doesn't know they're there. I turned to my dad and I said, hey, Dad, why don't we grab our baseball gloves and go out into the park and play catch? And that's what we did. So one of my favorite memories with my father, the greatest practical joke I ever pulled in my life, and I still have a photo because I had used to always have a little mini camera on me. I'm walking over to look at it now. There it is, my father on top of Alamo Square Park with his baseball glove in hand, and I took the photo. I said, hey man, let me take this picture. And so I took the picture. Then I put down the camera, and me and my dad played catch like we did when I was a kid, just having a conversation, because it was all about the conversation and having that one private moment with my dad, tossing the ball back and forth. And then maybe 4:30, we got in the car and we drove to the Twin Peaks bar. And then my dad and my uncle and my brother, they didn't even wait for it. They saw us and they came out of the front door immediately. Hey, happy birthday. Let's get the fuck out of here. And I let them stew in the toughest leather gay bar in San Francisco for at least an hour and a half before I took my dad there and surprised him. So baseball was always the thing with my father and I. You know, when he was living in LA, he lived in Anaheim, and we would go see the Angels a lot. He really enjoyed that. We'd go to Dodger Stadium sometimes. But when I lived in New York City, 1998 to 2000, before I moved to Amsterdam, my father, the other great old ballpark, so the Wrigley Field is the oldest, and then Fenway Park in Boston is the second oldest. So again, it was my dad's birthday. He flew out to New York City to visit me, and then we rented a car and we drove up to Boston to go see a game at Fenway Park, which neither one of us had ever been to before. So, we bought Boston hats. It's another weird thing about me is, I like to buy a hat of the home team. I like to feel like I like to be in the crowd and cheer for the home team, unless whatever, it's a team that I really like. But I got us tickets on the front row, right in the where the outfield wall is, the front row in front of or behind, however you say it, right field, which is where Ted Williams played right field for the Red Sox. And Ted Williams, arguably the greatest hitter who ever played. Like his thing, I read his biography. It's such a great story about him. But he said, when I walk down the street, I want people to point at me and say, there goes the greatest hitter who ever lived. And it was really one of the most special moments and memories I ever had with my dad. Such a great father-son trip to go to Fenway Park in Boston together and go see that game. Here's a cheeseball thing about me. Robert Redford died, just a few weeks ago. And I have to watch this movie every couple of years. I like cheesy baseball movies, and this is the greatest cheesy baseball movie of all time, The Natural. And so many elements about that movie. But he says in the thing, when I walk down the street, I want people to point and say, there goes the greatest hitter who ever lived. And that they got that, whoever wrote the movie, from Ted Williams. But the movie starts out, he's this young prospect. He wants to play Major League Baseball. And then some crazy woman shoots him. And there was actually a story, and it was the Chicago Cubs. I have the book. I haven't read it. Where is it? And I think she was like a showgirl dancer or something. And she had an affair with a Chicago Cubs baseball player, and she shot the guy. So that was the inspiration for I'm looking at my books trying to find it. That was the inspiration for the story in that movie. But, it's cheesy, but I love it. And, at the end of the movie, Robert Redford's hitting home runs that are breaking the lights. And anyway, that's a feel-good movie. And then, my dad collected bobblehead dolls. That's you may have heard the joke that I do about that. I mean, I always thought it was stupid. Oh, so when we went to the last Senators game, my dad got a Senators bobblehead. And I always found it interesting because it's a black player. Whatever. In 1971, you didn't see too many, I don't ever remember. But the very first bobblehead doll of the family collection is a Washington Senators, and it's a black player. So my brother's fighting and horsing around, the jaw of it was broken off, but I still have it. And then my dad collected these bobblehead dolls, and I always thought it was kind of stupid. And but it was a simple thing that made him happy. Oh, here's my Senator's bobblehead doll. Too bad he can't talk. Yeah, look at him with his little chin broken off. Still adorable. So when my father died, and I was looking through all of his stuff of what I wanted to keep, I kept his bobblehead doll collection. You know, that's a family without generational wealth. We pass on our bobblehead doll collections. So, and because I live in Los Angeles, they are now my earthquake detection system. That's the joke. Nonetheless, whenever I go see a Major League Baseball game now, I always try and go on bobblehead night when they give away the free bobblehead. So I don't know what I have now, 60, 70, 80? No, I'm not sure. But the original 30 or 40 was from my father. Nonetheless, what else can I tell you about the great game of baseball? Okay, I know what I need to tell you. Because I'm looking around my apartment and, you know, looking at so much baseball stuff. You know, and going back to that movie, The Natural, you know, and then the connection with my father. The reason I love baseball is because it can instantly bring me back to my childhood innocence and feeling like a boy. You know, and the world is cruel and mean and getting nastier by the day. And, you know what's happening. And it's pretty frightening. But, you know, baseball within the stadium and what's happening is still very innocent and beautiful. So here's a story that's not innocent and beautiful, but it is baseball related to, you know, my father. I remember it was early 2000s, and I was living in Amsterdam at the time. So this is like, I don't know, this is over 20 years ago. Some independent filmmaker, some guy was trying to make a movie. Or he did make a movie. And he had contacted me about being in his movie. And nothing ever happened with the film. I don't even know if it was ever completed. But he shot it in Berkeley, California. And so it was in a bar. The whole thing took place in a bar. And I remember the guy wanted to do the whole movie in one take, which was impossible. There's no way, using mostly amateur actors, everyone is going to be able to do an hour-and-a-half movie perfectly without flubbing somewhere. So, nonetheless, I remember it was a good experience. It was, I remember I liked the crew and the people that were working on it. And Berkeley, California is just a wonderful place. So there was a break in rehearsals or filming or whatever, and I went to walk around Berkeley, California. And there was a antique store. And in the antique store, in the window, was a ceramic Babe Ruth cookie jar. And, you know, it's interesting because my father was my hero. So I always, saw my father as like Muhammad Ali and Babe Ruth, just this towering, iconic figure. And I remember telling him this one time, and he was like, "Really?" And I was like, "Yeah, to me, you're Babe Ruth and Muhammad Ali rolled in one." And so I remember I bought this Babe Ruth cookie jar for him, and I remember giving it to him and telling him this. You're my home run hitter, Dad. You're my home run king. You're my Babe Ruth. and our shared love of baseball. It was just really a cool gift. And I remember I paid $50 for it. And it was awesome. Anyway, so my father, in his loneliness, in his whatever you want to call it, he married, because my parents were divorced for a long time. He married a woman from the Philippines. He married two women from the Philippines, but this was the first one. And she had a gambling problem and a crystal meth addiction. And I remember my dad, he was telling me, and I was like, Dad, no, crystal meth is some serious shit. And he was like, well, you smoke weed. And I was like, Dad, there's a big difference. So anyway, I feel like this woman clearly married my father to get the papers to live in the United States legally. And then things became tumultuous, to say the very least. He was living in Costa Mesa, a very wealthy area. And he lived in this little trailer park. And it was actually this really great little trailer park. There was, I think, only 20 trailers. And it had been put there like 1950 or something. And then they built up Costa Mesa all around there. And Costa Mesa is next to Newport Beach. So this is like a wealthy area of Southern California. So anyway, I loved this area where my dad was living back then. And I used to love visiting him. And anywho, I may have been back in Europe at the time, but I remember hearing this story now, and it happened on my birthday weekend because my dad always called me for my birthday, but not this year. It turns out he was in jail. Him and this woman had a big drunken argument, and I don't know. I don't know all the details, other than somewhere in this argument, this woman grabbed this Babe Ruth cookie jar that she knew I gave to him and was very special, but a special item of my father and I's relationship. She grabbed this Babe Ruth cookie jar and smashed it. And then I remember when I finally got to talk to my dad and found out that he was in jail for my birthday, and this woman is smashed. And then, they ended up breaking up because of this incident. It was a very ugly thing. Anyway, and then my father, he married another Filipino woman, and that's a whole nother story unto itself. But it bothered me for years that this woman took this really special gift and she smashed it. It's not your right to smash a beautiful gift. But, drugs and alcohol, man, that's what happens. Anywho, so during the pandemic, it's really bothered me for years. So during the pandemic, I was Googling Babe Ruth cookie jar, and boom, it pops up. And then there was someone who was selling it for $250, someone else who was selling it for $200, and someone for selling it for like $150. And I was like, fuck, I'm not spending that kind of money on it. So as the pandemic wore on, I would check, eBay once in a while. And then boom, one popped up for $85. And then they were selling it. Also, the Babe Ruth cookie jar came with a Babe Ruth book. Where's that book? It's a really cute book. It was kind of a kid's book from like the 1950s or something about Babe Ruth. Anyway, I got it. I have it back in my life, and it's right here. I'm looking at it. Is this beautiful Babe Ruth cookie jar. And it makes me happy because it reminds me of the connection I had with my father. So October is when I start paying attention to baseball because it's the playoffs. It's exciting. Right now you've got the Dodgers up 2-0 on the Brewers, and the Seattle Mariners are up 2-0 on the Toronto Blue Jays. It's wonderful to see October baseball happening in Seattle at the moment. And they got this guy, Cal Raleigh, who's probably going to win the MVP for the American League this year. because he's a catcher and he hit 60 home runs, which has never been done before. So when I was dating that woman from Toronto a few years ago, I became a huge Blue Jays fan. I think it's exciting. I love their team. I love Vladimir Guerrero Jr. And then also I thought that the Blue Jay is probably the least offensive mascot of any of the sports mascots. But I don't know if you saw this video. Somebody sent it to me a couple weeks ago, and it was in Ontario, Canada somewhere. Some woman set up a little bird bath feeder, and it had a little water spray. It was like a water fountain for birds, not a feeder. What do you call it? A bird bath. And this woman set up a camera, and the same blue jay kept coming every day and would chase away other birds that came. And it would sit on the water spray with, I don't know, its butthole. Do birds have sex organs? I don't know. But they must, because this blue jay in the video, if you've seen it, comes to this water bird bath every day, sits on the little spray fountain, and then it spread its arms, spread its wings, and then it's got its head tilted back like it's in ecstasy. And I don't know, man. It looked kind of dirty, like the bird is there pleasuring itself sexually. So anyway, maybe Blue Jays are not as innocent as I thought they were. But I like that Rogers Center. I like that all of Canada has rallied around the Blue Jays because they're so angry with the United States right now with the tariffs and Trump saying they should be the 51st state and all that. But it looks like it's probably going to be an all West Coast World Series with the Dodgers versus the Mariners, unless these teams turn it around. But the last thing I want to say about baseball and why I love baseball, when I was a kid, I had a baseball card collection. And I always loved my dad bringing me a pack of cards or buying cards when I was a kid with whatever little money I was allowed from my allowance. And, my father, so now I lived here in Los Angeles. My father was living in LA. So when I left here in 1998, after my sitcom finished, and I moved back to New York City, and then I moved to Amsterdam in the year 2000. I gave my father my baseball card collection, my childhood baseball card collection, to keep it safe for me, to preserve it. And I had totally forgot that my dad had my baseball card collection until after he died, when I was looking through his stuff, and I found the bobblehead dolls. And then I find my childhood baseball card collection, or it was my childhood collection, and then also like cards I had bought as a young adult up until 1998. So that was really cool, and I had it in a closet upstairs in my bedroom, in this kind of secret closet pushed behind this cabinet that I had put in the way. So during the pandemic, a lot of you know I witnessed a suicide November 19th, 2020. And that really shook me up. That really fucked me up. And I was in a dark place for a long time, and I was by myself here. And to pull myself out of this dark hole of trauma that I was in, I got back into baseball cards. Nothing too expensive. Fairfax High School every Sunday has a flea market, and there's a guy there, Jeff, who sells old sports cars and sports cards and old vintage postcards. So I would go there, and they're like $1 each, and I would sit there. It felt really good to get reconnected with my childhood innocence and find joy in something that brought me joy when I was a kid, to just look through these boxes that he had and find cards. So it really helped me therapeutically and cathartically to get back into the baseball cards. So a few months ago, I moved this big cabinet. I had to empty the damn thing and then to move it. And then I got my childhood baseball card collection. Oh, I forgot the most important thing. So my father, he had held onto my baseball card collection. And when I found it after he died, my beautiful father had separated all the cards. He had organized them team by team. And then he wrote on these little yellow pieces of paper, Minnesota Twins, Toronto Blue Jays, Seattle Mariners, and he made little sections. So it really, really beautiful that my father did that and organized it. And I didn't realize he had done such a loving thing until after he had passed. So when I got all my cards combined with these new cards that I've collected since 2020, slowly I've got these 3-ring binders, and I've got I don't even think I've done half the teams yet, but I've been organizing them and putting my cards in these nice little binders, and they've got these plastic sheets you can buy that have pockets, and each sheet holds 9 baseball cards. So I'm making a binder for each team. And putting, the best cards in these little pockets. But when you open the binder of each team, one of the first things you will see is I put the little yellow pieces of paper with my dad's handwriting on it. So you open up Seattle Mariners, and there's my dad's handwriting, Seattle Mariners. So anyway, baseball was always something I did with my dad. It was this connection we had. Loved going to games with my dad. Love, my love of baseball cards, and that he preserved them. So it's really a special thing. And, it's going to take me a long time to organize all these cards. But anyway, kind of beautiful. So that's it. Geez. I think one of the coolest baseball cards I do not have, I think Billy Ripken was Cal Ripken's brother, and they played a joke on him. It's kind of a famous baseball card. I've only seen pictures of it. And he's holding a baseball bat, and on the bottom round knob of the baseball bat, they had written with a Sharpie, "fuck face." And he didn't know that he was holding the bat that said "fuck face" on the bottom. So apparently, they made a lot of cards, and it's a famous card. It's the Billy Ripken fuck face card. Maybe one day I'll find that at a flea market. That'll be happy. Anyway, I'm excited. And then the Dodgers. I was a Giants fan, and San Francisco fans, they don't like they hate the Dodgers. But the guy who cuts my hair is from Japan. And the Dodgers have all these amazing Japanese players on it. So it's exciting to watch them. Anyway, it's exciting when the city you live in wins the World Series, because then you can go out and turn cars over and loot and set shit on fire. I'm just kidding. Don't do that. Anyway, that is basically everything I can think to tell you of why I love baseball. I hope wherever you're at, whatever's going on in your life, you're happy. Hey, maybe you and I can go out to the park and play catch sometime while our homophobic brothers and uncles sit in the Twin Peaks bar in San Francisco. Anyway, hooray for humanity, hooray for baseball, and hooray for comedy and laughter. All right, I love you. See you soon. I'm going to Ireland next week.
Jose, can you hear that Tom Rose is here? T-O-M, R-H-O, D-S-E-S, the mother with the mother for sure. Jose, can you hear that Tom Rose is here? T-O-M, get it, R-H-O, D-S-E-S, the mother with the mother for sure.